While some rice farmers across Guyana have been heeding the call from the Ministry of Agriculture to discontinue the use of the insecticide imidacloprid, or PRONTO as it is traded here, many are still continuing the practice of using this drug. This is one of several pesticides for which residue levels have been found to exceed new maximum residue limits, or MRL, from produce such as paddy and rice entering markets in the European Union. As is explained by Deputy General Manager of the GRDB, Mr. Kuldip Ragnot, the new EU guidelines mean that if farmers continue to use Pronto for the control of the paddy bug, then it could put Guyana's rice at risk of being prohibited from its main international markets.
Imidacloprid is the active ingredient in Pronto. Farmers, generally, if you ask them what is imidacloprid, they will not be able to tell you. But that's more of a scientific name. But of course, if you ask them about Pronto, all the rice farmers in this country, vegetable farmers as well, would know what Pronto is. All the discussion and the conversation now that where Pronto is involved, it's because of a pronouncement by the EU sometime last year that the MRL levels, which is the maximum residual limit, those values are now 0.01 milligram per kilogram. That is almost zero. It means that products or rice that is going to the EU, when it's tested for imidacloprid or Pronto, because the EU they are very strict in terms of residues, whether chemical, whether pesticide, heavy metals. They're very particular with those residues in rice. So these commodities that go into the EU, they all are tested, whether it's rice, whether it's wheat, whatever commodity it is, they are tested for these residues.
Guyana currently exports almost 50% of its rice to markets in the EU, so it is important that the nation's farmers play their role. It is against this background that Agriculture Minister Zulfikar Mustafa had also joined in the call for the nation's farmers to be responsible in heeding the call in using alternative pesticides to Pronto.
First of all, I want to say that as minister, I was very concerned with the way farmers use these chemicals. And I asked, not because the EU would have brought it to our attention, but I've asked GRDB to put system in place so that we can have regular interaction and training amongst the farmers in relation to these chemicals. Because chemicals are very dangerous. It can threaten our markets and at the same time our health. So what I have asked, I set up a committee that is working with the Pesticide and Toxic Control Board, the GRDB, NARI, and they have been working together to reduce the dangerous chemicals. So I'm hoping that these chemicals that are considered dangerous are on the list that cannot work in our country. I'm hoping that we can get them off and have more environmentally friendly chemical in the system. What the GRDB is doing is nothing new, is a process that we have to continue to work with the farmers to enlighten them, to ensure that they understand the effects of these chemicals, the danger of these chemicals, so that we can use it in a more responsible manner.
According to the GRDB Deputy General Manager, the training programs referred to by Minister Mustafa have intensified across the country, and the board is satisfied that the farmers have recognized the importance of heeding the call to refrain from using pesticides that could place the country's rice markets in jeopardy and, by extension, hurt their own livelihoods.
We at the board, having recognized that, since the announcement was made by the EU, we at the board, having recognized that, has rolled out a massive campaign or program of training farmers, making them more aware of what are MRLs, what does it mean for Guyana exports to Europe, the EU, and also the United States, because we saw recently that a shipment of rice was examined for the MRL imidacloprid in the US. So it's not only the EU alone, the US is also taking a closer look at the MRL for imidacloprid. So, like I mentioned earlier, having recognized this, we at the board started this program of training of farmers last year. It has gained momentum this year, late last year and this year. We're seeing more and more farmers are being trained, becoming aware of what the limit is, and also how we have to manage the use of PRONTO in our country in order for us to adhere to these limits.
So what have farmers been using in place of PRONTO in their management of the dreaded paddy bug? The GRDB had published a list of pesticides that are viable alternatives. These include Caprid, Tengard, Abamectin, Fastac, Bestac, etc., all of which have been proving very effective against the pest during the first crop this year. Recently, Caribbean Chemicals, the Guyanese-owned company that imported and marketed PRONTO, announced that they had been granted permission by the Pesticide Board for the importation of a new and promising alternative for the management of paddy bugs, a chemical that should be on the market in time for the next crop. According to Martin Lopez, senior agronomist at Caribbean Chemicals, since the announcements regarding PRONTO, the company has been researching viable alternatives and, having gotten samples, have worked with the GRDB in conducting field trials with exciting results. He said the entire process has been seamless.
So we realized that this was going to be something very, very serious. So we began working it at immediately. We realized that we had to play our part. The Ministry of Agriculture was playing its role, and we definitely had to step up. So we started searching through our suppliers and what was available, and we actually came up not only with one but with two different products. One of them is a standard thing that is used in some of the better rice producing areas, and the other is much newer but an organic product. So this would be for those who might want to do a specialty rice. We knew that we could not simply just bring this thing down. We had to do our testing and all that sort of thing. So we had our rice manager, Subhas Prasad. He immediately started, we got samples, he started testing, making sure this thing could work. And I must say that it was a pleasure working with the ministry people. Everybody stepped up to the plate, Christopher. The GRDB, the ministry, the pesticide board, everybody was involved in this. And you know, it was such a pleasure as part of the private sector to be able to work with the government institutions, you know, as fellow Guyanese on a particular problem. And we really feel good about being able to play some part in providing a solution to the problems that the farmers are going to face, because they have to move away from PRONTO and move on to something else which will be allowed to pass by the European Union.
That company's rice manager, Mr. Subhas, explained that it was important to find a product that would address the problems of reinfestation.
What farmers was doing, they were using the pyrethroid for the management of paddy bug. You know, pyrethroid is not so effective. They will kill, but you'll find, because of migratory pests, you'll see paddy bug coming back again, probably within 2 or 3 days. So we had to find a replacement very quickly, and we get into action very, very quickly. We did some research, and we found out that there's a product using in Japan, which is very, very effective for sucking insects. And it has an MRL of 8, whereas imidacloprid has an MRL of 0.01. So there's a big difference in terms of residue there. So we get into action immediately. We got the product out of China, and we start work with it immediately. The active ingredient is a very long name. We have to find a name for it. It's dinotefuran. So for the past 2 seasons now, we start work with it. And this is in collaboration with GRDB. They also did some work with it. I gave them some sample. And we did work in Mahaica Creek and some other location. And I can tell you, the result is fantastic. It's a very good product. You find there's some contact action with it, and also the residue may probably be about 1 week. So if there is a reinfestation, you know it's a migratory pest. If you get a reinfestation and in about a week after, you will still get killed. So it's a fantastic product.
The issues that have arisen in relation to residue levels has brought to the fore a bigger problem, as was referred to by Minister Mustafa in his comment earlier, and that is the misuse or abuse of dangerous pesticides on farms across the country. This issue is currently the focus of an intensive nationwide program being rolled out by the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, PTCCB, of the Ministry of Agriculture. Ms. Tricia David Garnath is the registrar of the board.
From the Pesticides and Toxic Chemical Control Board's perspective, one of the concerns that we've always highlighted within the agriculture sector and the way in which pest and disease management is occurring currently, there's a high dependency on chemical pesticides. One of the problems with that is, and we're seeing it more and more today, is you're having more and more residues, pesticide residues remaining in agricultural commodities that are produced locally. And a current example of that is the management of paddy bug in rice. One of the things that as an agency and as a regulatory authority we've always been emphasizing more and more is a moving away or a reduction in the use of highly hazardous chemicals and a reduction in the dependency on these chemical pesticides. It's one of the reasons why one of the things that the board has launched or embarked on a number of years now is encouraging the registration of lesser toxic pesticides, which include